Hey guys, it's Rhonda. Thanks for joining me again for another process video. This is a 12 by 12 layout that is going to go in my Yellowstone album. And this is an area of the park called the Norris Geyser Basin. We started out day 3 by heading to the Norris Geyser Basin, and it quickly became one of my favorite spots in all of Yellowstone. We did spend quite a bit of time here, and I took quite a bit of photos. So most of those ended up going into pocket pages, but I did decide that I wanted to take a couple of the photos and make a title page for this section of the park. So that is what I am working on right now. The photos that I'm using, I ended up printing out, I believe they're a 3.5 by 5. Now I've been wanting to do a 12 by 12 layout where I used smaller photos for quite a while, and this just seemed like the perfect time to do that. So I printed them on my printer. I have a Canon Pixma, and I went to Photoshop and I made them smaller by using the contact sheet option when I printed my photos. So I'm pretty sure it makes them a 3.5 by 5, which kind of seemed a perfect size for this layout. I really do like the way that it turned out. So the paper that I'm using for the background are from the Photoplay Yellowstone collection. And I wanted to go with the green because the photos that I'm using have pine trees in them. And I thought that the pine trees would really pop if I went ahead and used some green in the background. So I did end up gutting the green paper because I didn't want to use the whole thing. So I just cut out the inside. Now I've got that I can use somewhere else. So I went ahead and used this Tim Holtz Distress ink. This is in the color Peeled Paint, and I do use this Distress ink throughout this layout. This pine tree border was something that I downloaded from the Silhouette store. I have a Silhouette Cameo, and so I downloaded it and cut it. And I chose to do a little bit darker green paper on that, just again to add just another element of green and to bring in some more pine trees for this layout. So what I'm doing right now is just kind of layering up my paper. You can see me struggle. I've switched adhesives and I've gone with this permanent rather than the dot adhesive that I used to use. And man, I'll tell you what, when it sticks, it sticks. And sometimes I have a hard time getting it up. So I struggled with that a little bit. This ledger paper that I have here was something that I have had in my stash for years. And I found it when I started, kind of pulling things together that I thought I wanted to use in this album. And I thought, I need to use this ledger paper. I love using ledger paper in my layouts. They just are great areas for journaling, just all kinds of uses for them. And so I saw it sitting in my stash of stuff and I thought, I'm going to use this ledger paper on this layout. So this is going to just become the background area for my actual photos. So the photos that I have here are from a couple different areas in the Geyser Basin. It was unbelievable. First of all, the Norris Geyser Basin is huge. Huge. There's walking trails all throughout it, and I could have easily spent hours out there. Just like everything you come across is just so different from everything that you've seen before. And the one thing that really caught my eye here was the water. Now, apparently this area of the park has a lot of silica in the water, which gives that water the milky blue color that it has. And I just found it fascinating. So then I came upon this area called the Porcelain Basin, and it blew me away, just absolutely blew me away. I became emotional. Like, I don't even know what was going on with me, but I just stood there at the overlook and I thought, how is this even possible that this is here on planet Earth? And it was so funny because as I was thinking this, the guy next to me said to his wife, he said, what planet are we even on right now? And I thought, that completely sums up exactly what I am feeling right now. Like, what planet are we even on? How is this even possible? Yeah, it was absolutely quite amazing. So, but what I've done with those photos, so I used a little bit of the fun foam because I wanted to pop one of them up just a little bit so they both weren't laying flat on the layout. So I love using the fun foam to do that. So I just took a piece of yellow fun foam and stuck it down on the back of that photo. So then I turned to my Fisker punch, which I have to say I'm proud of myself for using this as many times as I have. Normally it sits in a bin and I completely forget that they are there. So I made a point of putting this out on my scrapbook table so that I would see it and remember to use it. So this is probably, I think, like the third layout that I've used this punch on. And I do love the scalloped edge punch from Fisker. So I'm going to take some time and get this border strip cut down and fit to the exact size that I need it to be. I'm going to ink up the edges, make it look all pretty, and then of course, best laid plans, it's going to get almost completely covered up. So I love the way it looks. I get it glued down, and then by the time I'm done putting down my photos and putting down my embellishments, you end up seeing very little of this border strip by the time it's all said and done. But I tried, like I said, best laid plans. I do love the way it looks, and I wish that it wasn't all almost covered up, but it does end up being that way. So I'm getting that laid down, going to decide to go ahead and put my photos down. And again, that fun foam just gives it just a tiny pop up from the photo behind it. So it's just got a little bit of height on it. So, and I really like the way that that ends up coming together. So I'll get that stuck down, and then I'm going to try and figure out what I want to do as far as embellishments go. Now, I struggled with this a little bit. I want that wonder. I love that definition, and I love that circle with the leaf on it. And I really want them to be on this page, and I struggle with where to put them. So you'll see me move this around quite a bit. So what I did before I started this layout was I went ahead and pulled out all my embellishments that had green on them. So anything that was green and that I thought would work with this layout, I pulled and put at the top of my table. So that's the stash that I'm kind of pulling from. I decide to let it sit for just a minute, and I'm going to turn my attention to the title, which obviously is Norris Geyser Basin. So I put it over there to the right-hand side of this layout, and I'm going to play around with some more embellishments. When I do that, I realize that I've got my title in the wrong spot. And it's just, I think I struggle so much with the embellishments because I just don't have the room that I thought I would have. So I'm trying to see if I can pull in some of the blue, and I'm really struggling to make these embellishments work. So what you will see me do in just a little bit is move that title. So I'm going to move it over to the left-hand side of the layout, and then that gives me an area where the title is now to create a little bit larger embellishment cluster. So I'm just playing with some of the smaller pieces right now to see if I can make them fit. This is a tag, and I love the way this tag looks. But again, that permanent adhesive that I've been using made it really hard to pull up that border so I could stick the tag underneath it. But I finally get it, and I can get back to moving all this around. So this is where I decide I need to move my title. So I'm just moving it over to the left-hand side, and I do like that much better. You will see there's a little white spot there. I ended up pulling up some of the paper when I pulled up the letters. So I'm going to play with that embellishment cluster over there a little bit so that I can find some pieces that will cover up that little white dot. So I'm just kind of playing around with some things. I do love that little flower cluster right there. That is from, I believe it's Pink Fresh Studio. And this was one of these ephemera kits that I bought, and it wasn't quite what I thought it was going to be when I got it. And I thought, oh, I don't know if I'll use that a lot. I have not only used one packet, but I went ahead and bought a second one, and I used almost all of that. So it's just funny how you see some things and you're like, oh, I don't think that's going to work, but then it does end up working. So I'm playing around with that wonder definition again, and I know that I want to staple it, but the where it's at on the layout doesn't allow me to staple, so I can't reach my staple far enough to staple it. So I pulled it off and just added a couple staples so I get the look of staples without actually having to staple through the paper. So tip from me to you. So now I'm just going to play around with some more embellishments, trying to figure out what I want where. I do want to use some more of these Pink Fresh Studio flowers, but I don't really know where I want to use them. So I pulled out some of the little ones, knowing that if I'm going to use something, it's probably going to have to be on the smaller side. And I pulled out another one of the brown ones to cover up that little white spot where I tore the paper when I moved my title. So those do end up staying there. And so I'm trying to figure out now what else I can put where. Now this, again, this little round leaf is just going to be the death of me. I am trying to figure out where I want it to be. It just isn't working, and I think it's because it's round. And, trying to put a round peg in a square hole is kind of what I was trying to do, and so it just wasn't working for me. But I pulled out this flower and decided that I wanted to use that on there. It was a little bit too large to use by itself, so I ended up cutting it in half and just kind of tucking it between the tag and the scallop border, and I like the way that looks. So I haven't wasted a whole flower. Now I have a whole half, another half of that flower that I can use somewhere else. So I decided that I'm going to go ahead and glue down those two little flowers over there as well. And I distressed those, and they're just kind of the perfect addition over there at the bottom right. I go ahead and decide to glue down my wander. I like the way that looks. So I'm just going to play around and try and figure out what else I want to do with this. And then I realized I haven't really done anything up at the top right. So I decided to stick that strip down. That's just a scrap that has ended up in my scrap box from another layout. And I decided that I want to go ahead and use that it's going to be a great layering piece for that embellishment cluster up there. That heart card comes from a cut apart, which I believe was a Simple Stories collection that I thought would just be really good up there at the top. So I ended up trimming it down so that it would fit, and I like the way that looks up there. Now, when in doubt, I always pull out my tab punch. If I need to add another embellishment somewhere, I typically reach for my tab punch. I use that thing constantly. Now, when I have an empty tab like this, to me it just screams out for a word phrase or some sort of word sticker. And so I pulled out my Tim Holtz book, and I found this one, and obviously it's too big to fit on that tab, but I thought it was perfect and it had to be on this layout. And it says, travel the world over to find the beautiful. So first of all, it added another black element to my layout. So my title's black, and then this word strip is black. And I thought it was kind of a perfect way to tie in another spot of black onto this layout. One of the things that I love to do as well is to add word stickers on top of hearts. I do this on my layouts quite often. I just really love that look. So I went ahead and I cut the sticker in half just because it was too long the way it was. And then I trimmed the front side and the back side of the saying just so that it was a little bit more symmetrical and fit just a little bit better. I also took the other half of that flower that I had just sitting on my desk, and I thought that would be perfect to add up there. And then I grabbed one of those pink fresh little blue flowers to pull in a little bit more blue. I've got a couple of the things that I end up adding on top of there, but I like the way that cluster's coming together. So then I see in my little stash of pink fresh florals over there, I see these like little leaf fronds, and I thought, let me try and layer those underneath this flower cluster just to kind of pull those flowers in so they don't look like they're just floating underneath there. So I thought, let me just layer them underneath there, see how it looks, and kind of tie them all together. And I really like the way that ended up looking. I've never used those before, so I was quite impressed with the way that turned out. I do end up having to move them and play with them a little bit just to make sure they all fit. But yeah, it definitely tied it together a little bit better than just having those little flowers out there floating. Then I decide that I think I want to add a little bit of dimension to that flower. And so I pulled out some pop dots, and I decided I was just going to pop up the leaves. But then when I did that, I wasn't loving the way that looked. So then I decided to add one more pop dot underneath the flower, and that worked a lot better. I like the way that kind of pops off the page. The dimension of that kind of goes with the dimension that I used with the fun foam under that photo, and it just kind of worked together. So I'm glad I popped up the flower as well. So this layout is pretty much done. I'm going to pull out some of those Ellie Studio Puffy Hearts. I love those things. I use them like crazy. Just pulled in the green, pulled in some tan over there. And then I'm going to go ahead and finish this off with some enamel dots. So I'm just pulling, again, the greens, the tans, adding them to all of my embellishment clusters. I do decide to commit to putting down these little Pink Fresh Studio flowers. So I layer those down. And then, as I mentioned before, because it's a tab, I like to go ahead and put a word strip or a little word phrase or something up there. So I find this one that says magical, and I go ahead and add that to the tab. And I think I add one more enamel dot, and then that is enough to finish off this layout. So I'll show you guys an up close look at what this layout turned out like. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you found some inspiration from this. If you did, like, subscribe. Thank you guys for joining me, and I will see you again next time with another layout. Thank you. Bye-bye.